What would you do if the person you trusted most destroyed your life without remorse? What if the one who promised to love you chose someone else, not only leaving you but humiliating you in the process? My name is Catherine. I'm 31 years old. The cold that morning seemed harsh to me when I left the hospital in New York. The wind hit my face, but no cold in the world could be worse than what I felt inside. I was holding an envelope with fertility tests, another failed attempt. For several months I had tried everything to get pregnant, but the results were always the same. No signs of life growing inside me. I sighed, put the envelope in my bag, and walked to the car. I needed to tell Jack. Jack is my husband, the man I've lived with for 5 years of my life. The one who, despite difficulties, always held my hand and said we would be together, whether we had children or not. At least, that's what I believed. When I returned home, the door was ajar. A shiver ran down my spine. I never left the door unlocked. "Jack," I called, slowly entering. The house was quiet, but as I climbed the stairs, the silence was broken by laughter, low, muffled, intimate. My heart skipped a beat. Jack's voice was there, but with it was another voice, a woman's. Each of my steps seemed heavier, the corridor seemed longer than ever. When I approached the bedroom door, I didn't need to open it to know the truth. A dress thrown on the floor, whispers, the scent of expensive perfume mixed with betrayal. I felt the world spin. I didn't want to see, didn't want to confirm, but when my gaze fell on the woman in bed with Jack, shock made me hold my breath. It was Emily, my own sister. Time stopped. The blood drained from my face. I tried to speak, but my voice didn't come out. The silence was broken by Emily. No remorse, shameless. "Ah, Catherine," she said, smiling widely. "I'm glad you're here." Then the knife plunged even deeper. Emily got out of bed, ran her hand through her hair, and placed her palm on her stomach. "By the way, I'm pregnant." I felt my legs weaken. No, this can't be. Jack got out of bed, not even hiding his disdain. "We'd better accept reality, Catherine. We're going to get divorced." Emily took a step forward, like a predator pouncing on its prey. "You'll never be able to give him a child, Catherine. Yes, I know you're infertile. Defective." The world collapsed, and I fell with it. But what Emily didn't know was that the truth had not yet been fully revealed, and fate was about to teach her the greatest lesson of her life. The clock on the wall ticked, 3 a.m., but I was still sitting on the couch, staring into nothingness. The words echoed in my mind in an endless nightmare. I felt my chest tighten as if something inside me had been crushed. Why had fate been so cruel? Losing my husband was painful enough, but losing him to my own sister, that was unbearable pain. But most of all, it was humiliation. The way Jack spoke to me, coldly, without regret. The way Emily smiled, as if it were a victory. How would everyone in the family look at me now? With pity? The next day, after a sleepless night, I went to the hospital to see Dr. Brown, our family doctor. I wanted to get a prescription for a sedative. The door to his office was ajar, and I saw Jack and Emily. They were sitting at the table in front of Dr. Brown. "Is this really necessary?" Emily snorted, crossing her arms over her chest. "I'm pregnant, doctor. I need rest, not meetings for no reason." Dr. Brown ignored her impatience and took the envelope lying on the table. "Jack, I need you to listen to me very carefully, because what I'm about to say could change everything." The air became heavy. The doctor looked directly at Emily and took a deep breath before uttering the words that would make everything fall apart. "The child Emily is expecting. It can't be yours, Jack." The silence was absolute. I felt the world stop. Jack's eyes widened. The doctor continued, putting the test results on the table. "The genetic analysis we conducted shows that you cannot be the father of this child." Emily froze. The color drained from her face. This is impossible," she mumbled, laughing nervously. "This must be a mistake." But the doctor just shook his head. "There's no mistake. The tests are conclusive." Jack slowly turned to Emily. Shock was replaced by something much worse. Anger. "You lied to me!" Emily began desperately. "Jack, darling, But he was no longer listening to her. The truth was there, and there was no escaping it. Who until this moment had been humiliated, felt that something inside me had to change. I didn't need to do anything. Fate was already collecting its debt. Emily felt her body shaking as she left the hospital. The world around her seemed blurry, the doctor's words still ringing in her head. Jack can't be the father of the child. She tried to take a deep breath, but her lungs seemed unresponsive. How did this happen? How was her lie uncovered in this way? Jack walked beside her, but there was no longer any closeness between them. His gaze was empty, his face distorted with pure rage. He didn't look at her once. When they approached the car, he stopped and finally looked at her. His eyes were full of contempt. "You used me," he said, and his voice was full of resentment. Emily opened her mouth, but no words came out. She knew she had no excuses. The following days were a living hell. This news spread like a virus. The woman who ruined her sister's marriage, but ended up being deceived by her own lie, everyone said. Every look carried judgment. Even her mother, who had always defended her, couldn't hide her disappointment. "I defended you, Emily," her mother said with tears in her eyes. "And now, how can I look at Catherine and say I wasn't unfair to her?" Emily felt her face burning. The same venom she had used against her sister was now corroding her own skin. Meanwhile, I started breathing again. I still carried pain, but now there was a strange relief. Not because my sister was suffering, but because finally the truth had prevailed. But fate still held one last surprise for me. That morning, sipping coffee, I felt severe dizziness. A wave of heat passed through my body, and my hands began to sweat. I tried to ignore it, but when I stood up, the ground disappeared from under my feet. A few hours later, already in the hospital, sitting in front of the doctor, I expected the worst. Then came the moment of truth, and I felt time stop. This can't be true," I whispered, holding the paper in trembling hands. But Dr. Brown smiled gently. "Congratulations, Catherine. You're pregnant." The impact of these words was overwhelming. I had been told I could never become a mother. Years of carrying the pain of not being good enough. Now life had given me this answer in the most unexpected way. I put my hands on my stomach. A new life had begun there, but along with joy came a storm of emotions. What to do now? How to move forward? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time, I didn't feel fear. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. This child would change everything. The morning sun illuminated the small cafe where I held a cup of tea and watched the steam rise. Now the world looked different. I was pregnant after many years of believing I would never have such a chance. Life had given me a new purpose, but along with this happiness came fear. I couldn't deny the uncertainty growing in my chest. Would I be able to raise this child alone? Would I be ready for this? "Hey, Catherine." I looked up. Jack hesitantly approached my table. The man who once humiliated me now seemed smaller. Shoulders slumped, face tired, expression full of regret. "Catherine, can we talk?" I took a deep breath. I didn't expect to see him so soon, but deep down I knew this moment would come. "What do you want, Jack?" He pulled out a chair and sat down, running his hands over his face. He seemed lost. "I was an idiot," he said. His voice was hoarse with guilt. "I believed Emily. I turned my back on you. I threw everything away." I was silent. I wasn't going to make it easier for him. "And now that everything has gone wrong, you've realized your mistake?" Jack swallowed. The words hurt, but they were true. "I have no excuses. I just wanted to say I'm sorry about this." He hesitated before continuing. "The news about your pregnancy. I heard." My heart beat faster. So he already knew. "And what does that change, Jack?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He looked at me with pleading eyes. "I want to be present. I want to make things right." I laughed weakly. This was incredible. "You ruined our life for a woman who humiliated me, and now you want to come back?" He lowered his head. The weight of guilt was visible. "I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know you may never forgive me, but I need to try." I took a deep breath. I felt strangely at peace. I watched him for a few moments before responding. "Jack, you made your choice. Now I'm making mine." He widened his eyes. "What does that mean?" I stood up and grabbed my bag. "It means I've finally learned my worth. You're no longer part of my life." Without looking back, I left the cafe. The weight I had carried for years was gone. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I no longer needed Jack for happiness. I was free. The cold wind pierced the streets of New York, and Emily walked hurriedly, trying to ignore the contemptuous looks she received. She was no longer the confident and arrogant woman she had been before. Now her name was shrouded in scandal, a shadow of herself. Abandoned, without money, without support, without prospects, she tried to find shelter in her mother's house, but was met with a stern look. "I don't know who you are anymore, Emily," her mother said, crossing her arms over her chest. "You destroyed your sister, and you still lied to everyone." Emily tried to hold back tears. "I thought I was doing it for a better future." Her mother shook her head in disappointment. "And look where it's brought you." Having no choice, Emily was forced to look for a small, cheap apartment to live in. The luxurious life she had dreamed of vanished like smoke, but her nightmare wasn't over yet. The real father of the child found her. That night, when she closed the door of her house, footsteps echoed in the corridor. She turned and saw Brian, Jack's former colleague and the man with whom she had cheated on her beloved. His eyes were dark, full of anger. "So, you thought you could hide this from me?" Emily's heart pounded. She had never planned for Brian to find out about this. I didn't want to involve you," she mumbled, taking a step back. He laughed sarcastically. "But it happened. And what are you going to do now? Cut me out of my son's life?" She trembled. Brian wasn't a trustworthy man. He had always been manipulative, cold, and dangerous. "You have no right to come here," she tried to say, trying to keep her voice steady. He came closer, not taking his eyes off her. "This child will now be my responsibility. You have no choice." Despair overtook Emily. For the first time, she felt real fear for the future. What had she done? Why had she destroyed everything for an illusion? Meanwhile, I was living in a completely different reality. As the pregnancy progressed, I began to feel real happiness. With each day, I felt stronger and more confident. My life was finally on track. But there was something I still couldn't ignore. Emily. Despite everything, despite all the harm my sister had caused me, there was a concern inside me. Does she deserve to fully bear this burden? Should I seek her out or finally walk away and leave her behind? The answer came sooner than I expected, because the next day Emily knocked on my door, and this time there was no arrogance, no evil smiles. There were only tears and desperation. I stared at the door, unable to move. The last person I expected to see there was Emily. My sister was unrecognizable. Sunken eyes, gaunt face, disheveled hair. There was no arrogance in her posture, just desperation. For a long time, neither of us said anything, until Emily, for the first time in her life, lowered her head. I have no one else, Catherine." Her voice was weak, trembling. "I messed everything up." I crossed my arms over my chest, feeling the weight of the past between them. "What do you want from me, Emily?" My sister bit her lip, tears flowing uncontrollably. "I didn't come to ask for anything. I just wanted to see you." I felt a lump in my throat. As much as I wanted to ignore it, something inside me hurt to see my sister in this state. "You threw everything away, Emily. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it." Emily nodded, wiping away tears. "I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted to tell you, I'm sorry about this." These words struck me in an unexpected way. I had waited so long to hear this, but now that I finally heard it, I no longer felt satisfaction. I just felt sadness. Sighing, I took a step back. "Emily, you need to find a way to start over, but I can't carry this burden for you." My sister let out a weak, humorless laugh. "I understand." I was about to close the door when I noticed a bruise on Emily's neck. She tried to cover it with her collar, but it was too late. I had already seen it. "Emily, what's going on?" I asked, suddenly feeling alarmed. She looked away. "Nothing. I just fell." But I knew my sister. Even now, when she was broken, Emily would never admit her weakness. Something was wrong. "Who did this to you?" I insisted. Emily started to tremble. "Brian, the father of the child. He found me. He said he would take the child as soon as it's born. He's dangerous, Catherine." Suddenly everything changed. Despite everything that had happened between us, I couldn't allow my sister and her unborn child to be in danger. "Come in," I said, opening the door wider. "We need to talk." Emily looked at me with surprise and gratitude. As she entered, I felt something change inside me. Maybe it was the maternal instinct awakening in me, or just human compassion, but I knew I couldn't leave my sister alone in this situation. "We'll find a way out," I said, closing the door. "Together." 5 years have passed since the day Emily knocked on my door. Much has changed since then. My sister and I went through a difficult path of reconciliation and rebuilding trust. It wasn't easy, but we managed. Brian no longer posed a threat. With the help of a good lawyer and family support, we were able to get a restraining order and ensure the safety of Emily and her child. Today, I sit in the park, watching my son Ethan play with his cousin, Emily's son. They laugh and chase each other, knowing nothing of past conflicts and pain. Emily sits next to me. She has changed, become softer, kinder. Motherhood changed her just as it changed me. "Thank you," she says quietly, looking at the playing children. I turn to her. For what? For not turning away from me when I needed it most. For giving me a second chance. I smile and take her hand. We're family, Emily, despite everything. Jack is no longer part of our lives. He tried to come back, but we both realized that some bridges are better burned. Now we have a new life, new opportunities. As I look at our children playing together, I understand that sometimes the darkest moments of our lives can lead to the brightest light. Betrayal and pain led to healing and a new beginning. Emily and I went through hell, but came out stronger. We learned to forgive, to trust again, and most importantly, to love unconditionally. Life is unpredictable, and no one knows what awaits us tomorrow. But today, in this moment, I feel gratitude for a second chance, for the strength of family bonds, and for the unexpected turns of fate that, in the end, led us to happiness.